Well, Mosaic, I am really excited for us today because we have a special guest speaker who's going to be giving the message today. His name is James Davis, and he is a huge friend of Mosaic. He worked with Carl at a church in Virginia Beach. They worked together, and over the last couple years, God has just been working in James's life, and James is actually going to plant a church in Northern Virginia, Norfolk, this September. And when you plant a church, you have preview services where you kind of put it out there, people show up, and you hope you have a good number. James has had 4 of these, and the last one that they just did like 2 or 3 weeks ago had over 100 people at it, which I think is pretty awesome. It's great. And James is a talented communicator, but he's a great leader too, and we're really excited to have him here. His church is called The Rising. If you have family in Norfolk, I would encourage you guys to check out their website. I think it's wearetherising.com. He'll tell you about it, I'm sure. But would you guys please give a huge welcome to my man, James Davis.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Hey, well, thank you guys so much. Hey, it is an honor for me to be able to speak to you guys this morning. And I am just so grateful that Carl would offer the invite for me to share this platform that he's built. Not built physically, but built with his wisdom, his preaching, his teaching. And you guys have submitted yourself to his leadership and his vision, and that he would share this stage with me and allow me to speak into your life is really an honor for me, and I don't take that for granted. And I've really kept up with Mosaic's story since the very beginning. Just about 6 years ago when you guys started at the Movico Theater with just over 100 people to where you are now with 4 services to where you're going to be launching a brand new campus next year in 2015 is phenomenal. And this is an amazing church, and I really believe, I'm confident that Mosaic's best days are still ahead, that the best is yet to come, as long as you continue to dig ditches and do the hard work of trusting God for greater things as you turn the world upside down. Like, great and amazing things are going to take place with this church. And I know Carl because we used to work together at a church in Virginia Beach. We were on staff. He was the creative arts director, and I was the student ministry pastor. And me and Carl, we used to play this game. I don't know the title for the game. I don't think it has a title. But it was like a preacher version of I Spy. And the way that it worked is we would be at a restaurant or we'd be at the office or something, and one of us would see something in the room and we'd say, fork, right? So if Carl were to say fork, then I would have to come up with some mini sermon about forks, right? And how this had to do with God, and I'd have to figure out some sermon illustration. So like if he said fork, then I would say, well, see, a fork is, okay, that's a really difficult one. Could somebody here, just throw something out there you see in the room? A piano, right? Okay, gotcha. So a piano, right? A piano is something that makes beautiful music, right? And someone can, here we go. So someone with a piano, right? They can go and they can try their hardest to try and play beautiful music. But just because you try hard doesn't mean that you're going to play beautiful music. It takes a skilled musician who practices to play beautiful music. And in the same way, there are different disciplines and different ways that God calls us to live the Christian life. And we can try hard. We can do our best to get it right, but we won't always get it. Instead, it takes practice. And the more we practice, the better we get at it, so that we live a harmonious life with God. Yeah, right? Yeah. So me and Carl, we'd be at CC's Pizza, eating spinach pizza, just preaching mini sermons to one another. It was amazing. And but I also love my time with Carl on Wednesday mornings. Every Wednesday morning, we would go to Starbucks, and we would read books together. And I always saw great wisdom in Carl. I considered him to be the modern-day C.S. Lewis. And so I always wanted to learn from him, but I was so sad when I found out that he was going to be leaving to go plant a church. But now that I look at you in this room, I'm so grateful that he did the thing God called him to do. And I've really kept up with you guys' story. I've also admired Carl so much that in the process of me planting a church in Norfolk, I've asked him to be my coach, and so we talk every other week just about how things are going, and he really pours into me. So you guys are making a difference in the city of Norfolk through Carl. I just want to let you know that. The other thing is this. I admire this church so much that we brought some people on our launch team, a group of people who have come alongside me and said, hey, we're going to launch this church. We're going to tithe to the mission and the vision of this church. We're going to serve to see this happen. I brought 11 of those people here to Mosaic a few months ago just to learn from you, just to see the kind of culture you've created, what kind of church you are, and the things that you're doing, because I wanted to expose them to a really great church. So I'm grateful for the example that you've set as a church. Finally, the other thing I'm grateful for about Mosaic is your generosity. This is a generous church. You're making a difference, not just in Maryland, helping with organizations like the Samaritan Women and other organizations and planting churches all over the area, but you're making a difference in the world. You're also making a difference in the city of Norfolk, because I don't know if you know this or not, but Mosaic just recently bought The Rising, the church I'm launching, a brand new hot tub. Not for me, not at my house, but you guys just brought us a hot tub so that we can have a place. And so for those of you who give, I just want to say thank you. For those who give to the vision of the church, I want to say thank you, because you bought us a hot tub so that when people decide to accept Christ, we can set that up in our portable location, and now we have a place that we can baptize people because when they accept it. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. And I want to tell you that there are going to be some people that you may never meet this side of heaven, but one day in heaven they're going to come to you and they're going to tell you face to face, thank you for your generosity. Because you were generous, because you gave to the mission and the vision of your church, it impacted the church that I met God at, and because of that, that forever impacted my eternity. So again, thank you, Mosaic, for your generosity and what you've done. But I haven't come here to tell you about how great you are. I've come to give you a message that I really believe will change your life forever if you do this. So like Jonathan said, my name is James. I'm 31 years old. I'm married to my lovely wife, Irene. I won't tell you how old she is, but because it wouldn't be polite, but we've been married for 8 years, and we have a little girl. Her name is Amaya. She'll be 2 years old September 1st, and I love my family. Like, I love my family so much that I have trained and equipped them to be prepared for the impending zombie apocalypse. And I know you love your family too, so much that you've trained and equipped them to be prepared for the zombie apocalypse. But just in case you haven't, and I don't know who wouldn't, but just in case you haven't trained them yet, I want to give you some information that will help you for the zombie apocalypse when zombies overtake Elkridge. And also I want to test your knowledge of the zombie apocalypse and what you should do. And if you don't know this, the information you're about to get will probably help you last another 5 minutes when it happens, okay? But we're going to have some questions up here on the screen with multiple choice answers. I want you to think about it, and then you're going to tell the person next to you what your answer is so that your answer is locked in so you can't change it later when you find you're wrong. So we'll have the phrases up here with the multiple choice answers. Go ahead and tell the person, and then we'll see who's right. So here's the first one. The best weapon that you can have in a zombie apocalypse is A, a handgun, B, a sword, C, a chainsaw, or D, a crossbow. So go ahead and turn to the person next to you and tell them what your answer is. All right, and you're just telling them either the letter or the word. You don't have to go into a paragraph about why, so just they're still like mumbling. Okay, good. So how many of you then, raise your hand. All right, if you said D, crossbow, you are wrong. The answer is actually B, sword. So give it up if you said that. Because with a handgun and a crossbow, you have to have ammunition and accuracy. With a sword, you don't have to do that. With a chainsaw, it takes fuel. But with a sword, you can just keep a zombie at a distance and slice their head. So here's the next one. The best vehicle a person can use during the zombie apocalypse is A, an armored truck, B, a bus, C, a dirt bike, or D, a horse. Go ahead and lock in your answer with the person next to you. All right. Now, how many, you continued to go into this story about why. Just all it is just a word. So how many of you said C, a dirt bike? Raise your hand. You're afraid you're going to be wrong, right? Raise it high. If you said C, a dirt bike, you're right. Yeah, here's why. Because an armored car and a bus, you're not going to be able to drive it on a road that's been abandoned by cars. It's going to be blocked. And then a horse, you got to feed it and zombies eat it. So a dirt bike is the best option. By the way, if you don't agree with any of these answers, don't take it up with me. You need to take it up with Max Brooks. He wrote the Zombie Survival Guide, so you need to take it up with him. Here's the next one. The best place to go during a zombie outbreak is A, police station, B, a bank, C, a cemetery, D, a warehouse. So go ahead and tell your neighbor what your answer is. You guys are a storytelling group of people. No, it's all good. It's fine. So how about this? By round of applause, who said police station? All right, cool, you're wrong. The reason a police station is going to have a ton of people going there, namely you, and because there's a ton of people, it's a lot of food for zombies, so they're going to eat you first. B, a bank. Who said B, a bank? Yeah. This is also wrong because a bank, although it has a vault, you lock yourself in, you have no supplies, you starve to death. C, a cemetery. Who said C? So this is the second best answer, actually. The reason is because nobody's at a cemetery. So if you're on the run and you need a quick break, this is a good place to be because zombies flock where people are and no one's at a cemetery. Who said D, warehouse? Some of you changed your answer there because you're like, it's the last one. That has to be the right one. And it is. Warehouse is the right one. The reason is because you can fortify a warehouse, and typically warehouses have supplies there. And by the way, I think this is a warehouse, isn't it? All right, so if a zombie apocalypse ever breaks out, you should come to Mosaic, and you will be safe. Anyway, so now you know a bit about zombies. And as I was talking with Carl about speaking here today, he told me the title of the series. It was Zombie Life. And I thought to myself, this is brilliant that you would title a series Zombie Life because I am an expert at zombies. And I can share a lot of information with you, but then I thought, that's not going to change anybody's life. But then, as I asked him, why would you call it Zombie Life, he told me the passage you guys have been looking at. It's Romans chapter 12. Now, the book of Romans is actually a letter that the Apostle Paul, an early Christian who started a lot of churches around the known world, wrote to Roman Christians. And in Romans chapters 1 through 11, Paul is going through this whole explanation about the grace of God, how none of us deserve a relationship with God. We've all been shut off from God, but he provides a way by giving us his son, Jesus, to die on a cross, who rose again from the dead. And if we accept that sacrifice, if we accept that grace and that mercy, then we can have relationship with God. Then we can have life, right? So this is everything that's happening in Romans chapter 1 through 11, right? The grace, the mercy of God. And if we accept that, then we can have life. But then in chapter 12, Paul shifts gears. All this is about things that we need to think about, come to believe and understand, right? But then in chapter 12, he says, and so if you believe this, Romans chapter 1 through 11, if this means anything to you, if this has changed your life, if this has affected you, then this is what you should do as a result of that. This is Romans chapter 12. As a result of everything I just wrote in chapters 1 through 11, here's how you should live. And this is what he writes in Romans chapter 12, verse 1. He says, therefore, in light of all this, therefore, in view of God's mercy, because of everything I've already said in 1 through 11, therefore, in view of God's mercy, I urge you, I implore you, I beg you, I plead with you to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. A sacrifice is something that's dead, but Paul says, I want you to die to yourself and instead live for God. If this means anything to you, die to yourself and live a life unto him. Therefore, I urge you in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as living sacrifices. This is your spiritual act of worship, holy and pleasing to God, right? And then in verse 2, this is what he says. And do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, right? There's a way that this world acts. There's a way that this world lives. There's a way our culture is going. And he says, don't live conform to that pattern. Don't take your cues from culture, but instead be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you have a new mind. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant. I don't know if the creative team thought about this when they came up with the series title, but, well, I see a look of confusion on your face. This is brilliant to call it the zombie life because of how somebody becomes a zombie. You know how somebody becomes a zombie, right? I'll tell you. Here's how a person becomes a zombie. A person becomes a zombie when they're infected with the virus known as Solanum. Again, it's all right here. A person becomes a zombie when they're infected with the virus known as Solanum. They become infected with Solanum when they're bit by a zombie or the blood or bodily fluids of a zombie interact with theirs, and then it gets into their bloodstream, right? And what Solanum does is it goes and attaches itself to the frontal lobe of a person's brain. In the frontal lobe of someone's brain, solanum begins to reproduce. As it reproduces, it creates new cells, but kills the cells that it's feeding off of. So what solanum is doing is creating a new brain inside of the person, but this new brain is a dead brain. Paul said, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you would have a new mind, not the dead mind of a zombie, but the new mind of Christ that would teach you how to live and how to think, right? And then when somebody becomes a zombie, right, their brain is now dead, their body dies, but then they're reanimated, they come back, a living sacrifice, to be dead but alive, right? So a zombie dies and reanimates, and then its priorities are changed too. It no longer lives the way that it used to, but now it lives to feast on flesh, right? And this is just a shell of who was there. That person is no longer there. It's now this new dead thing, right? Paul said, become living sacrifices. No longer live for yourselves, but live for God. Who you were is gone, but now you're a new creation in Christ. So we need to live the zombie life, not as some dead, mindless monster who feasts on flesh, but instead as a new creation that lives to bring about life and love in the world, right? See, I just played the game like I did with you earlier, right? Did you catch that? No, but really, it's brilliant that this would be the zombie life, and this is what Paul is calling us to. And then he starts to flesh this out, right, in chapter 12, about what it means to live the zombie life. How do we actually live as a living sacrifice? And so we're just going to read 2 verses today to look at what it means to live as a living sacrifice. And really there's one word that encompasses this whole idea, and it's the word of love. So Romans chapter 12, verse 9, Paul is going to put some flesh and bones on what it means to be a living sacrifice. Romans chapter 12, verse 9, he says this: love must be sincere. Love must be sincere. See, to live as a living sacrifice, it's all encompassed around love, right? And Paul says your love must be sincere. Now, in our English language, we have one word for a lot of different meanings and feelings that we have, right? Like I could say, well, I love sushi and I love my wife and I love the Patriots, yeah? But not in that order. And we all get that I love these different things at different levels, right? I don't love sushi as much as I love my wife, and I don't love my wife as much as I love the Patriots, right? So, we'll just switch those. I don't love the Patriots as much as I love my wife. And so we get that there are different layers of love, different levels of love. And see, in the Greek language that Paul is writing in, there are all sorts of different words to describe love. And here, in this one sentence, Paul says, hey, agape anupakritas. Hey, agape anupakritas. And what he's saying, this word he uses for love, agape, is like a sacrificial sort of love. It's come to really be identified with this Christian love that Jesus has, that God has for us when he would come and be sacrificed on the cross, that even while we were still his enemies, while we were opposed to him, while we're in our sin, while we're rebelling against him, he still would give his life for us. This is an agape sort of love, right? A love that sacrifices. This is a love that you and I have probably for our spouse, right? Like no matter what they do, we can overlook those things and we can work through that. It's a love that we have with our kids oftentimes, right? Even though they rebel and they do bad things, we still love them, right? This is our kid. It's a sacrificial sort of love. And so Paul says, your love, the sacrificial love, needs to be sincere. And by the way, before I tell you about this other word, anapokritos, and sincere, what we're going to talk about is not some like grandiose, ethereal thought, something that would be really nice to think about or talk about or form a Bible study about, but it's something that Paul is actually expecting us to live out. And if we grab hold of this and live this out, then it changes everything. Because look, we all love love, right? I mean, everybody loves love. I mean, nobody isn't for love. Like, and we love the idea that God is love and that we should love and the world needs more love and love. And this is a good thing. But when it comes to actually living out love, well, that's a different thing, right? And so Paul says your love must be sincere, anapokritos. And really, this word here is more like not hypocritical. And as Paul is talking to his audience, they would have known exactly what he was talking about, because back then they knew, like, the actors of the Greek culture were called hypocrites. Because what they would do is they were a real person, but when they got on stage, they would perform. They would be somebody they weren't. They would be fake. And so they were called hypocrites. That's just where our term hypocrites has come from. And he says, your love must not be like that, but it must be the real thing. The word that we have in English is sincere. And this word comes from the Latin phrase sin, meaning without, and cera, meaning wax, without wax. This phrase, sincera, comes about from ancient culture when, let's say you wanted to buy a pot, right? You would go to your pot dealer. Not your pot dealer, but the pottery dealer, right? The pottery. So you want to buy a pot, you would go to the pot dealer, and you wanted a good pot, not a bad pot, and you would go and to test the pot to see if it was a crack pot or not a crack pot, is you would pour water in the pot. And if it leaked, then that was a crack pot, and you don't want a crack pot, you want a good pot, not a crack pot. So you would pour water in it. If it leaked, you don't want it. If it didn't leak, you'd say, oh, this is good. But what dishonest dealers would do is they would take wax and fill in the cracks of the pot. So when you pour water in it, it would hold water. You would say, oh, this is a good pot. You'd buy it, and then you'd get home later, and in the heat of the day, the wax would melt, and then the pot would leak because of the cracks there. You wanted a sincere pot, a pot without wax, but instead you got an insincere pot. See, sincere is, I want it to be what you claim it to be. I want it to be real. I don't want it to be fake. I don't want you to say that it's a good pot, but it's really a bad pot. I want it to actually be what you say it is. One of the things that people have said about this church is I love the love that I feel when I go there. It seems like everybody is real, right? It seems like I just felt a connection with people. People were so nice to me. And one of the great things about this church is you're authentic in your love. You're real in your love. I love one of the things you say, that to be a part of this church, one of the only criteria is that you have to be real. That you can come to this church, you can come to Mosaic, and you don't have to fill your flaws with wax niceties, but instead you can come with all your cracks, all your flaws, and in your broken humility, bring the shattered pieces of your life to God and say, please make a beautiful mosaic of your love with me. Like, that is a thing that I love about this church. And Paul says, your love must be sincere. Let it be the real thing. And this love, this sacrificial love, if we're open, if we're honest about it, if we're sincere about it, like, we don't have this love for everybody. See, also being sincere means being real with ourselves and realizing, okay, I don't really feel this way about everybody. I mean, this agape love is reserved for just a few people, but I don't feel this way about everybody. And being sincere about that means that you're open with that and you say, God, I don't love everybody like that. I want to love everybody the way that Jesus loves them. I want to respond that way, but I can't. I don't have the capacity. God, would you change my heart? Would you change my life? Help me to do that. And it's like Paul understands this. So he talks about some other types of love in Romans chapter 12, verse 10. Here's what he says in Romans 12:10. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. If this was translated in a different way in English, it would probably say something like, lovingly love others in a loving love, right? Lovingly love others in a loving love. And the reason is because Paul uses all sorts of different layers of love here. So this first one, agape, that he uses at first is like this sacrificial love. But then the next one in verse 10, it's like Paul gets it and he's like, okay, we can't all love people with a sacrificial love. So then just Philadelphia people. Philadelphia is this brotherly sort of love, right? The sibling sort of love. It's a love that is deep, and even though we may go through hard times together, we're still tight because blood is thicker than water, right? Like, we're related, we're siblings. This is a relationship that you may have with your siblings. It's a relationship you may have with close friends. Like, you would say, you're like a brother to me, right? Like, he says, if you can't love people with an agape love, then love people with a Philadelphia love, this deep sort of love that overlooks things. But even though it overlooks things and forgives things, sometimes this love can be shattered, right? Because some of you haven't talked to your brother or sister for 5 or 10 years because of something they said to you, something they did to you, they owe you money. So it's not a perfect love like agape, but at least it's something. And then he goes on, the next word that he uses, so he says, agape people, and let that be sincere. But if you can't, then Philadelphia people. But if you can't do that, then Philostorgoi people. Philostorgoi, and this is like a mutual sort of love. This is a love that I have with you, like we can have a drink together, watch a game together, we can hang out. It's a mutual sort of thing. This is the kind of love you have and I have with most of our relationships and our friendships, right? This Philostorgoi sort of love. But there's some people, if we're honest, that we just don't like. Like some people, I know you say to love them, but I don't even like them. I can't at all. And so there's different layers of love. Agape, the sacrificial love. Philadelphia, Philostorgoi. But then there's this other word Paul uses, and it's teme. Teme, and this is where we get the word honor from. Honor means to assign value, to assign weight to someone. See, there are people in our life we can't agape. We just can't bring ourselves there. We should, but we don't have the capacity to do that for everybody. There are some people in our life we can't Philadelphia. We can't have a brotherly love. We can't have a mutual friendship with. But he says, well, then honor people. Honor others above yourself. Honor, teme, assigning value to people is something that we can do to everybody. Whether we love them, have a relationship with them, like them, or not. See, I can honor everyone. I can assign value to everyone. The reason is because every single person who comes across your path is made in the image of God. Every person who comes across your path is someone whom God loves. And see, I can honor people, I can add value to them, I can think of them more highly than myself, not because they deserve it, but because of who I am. Not because of their character, but because of who I am. Not because of who they are, but because of who I am. Because I've been called to be a living sacrifice. I've been called to live not for myself, but for God. And because of that, it is my role, it is our role to honor one another above themselves. And here's the opposite of honor, assigning value, right? Giving weight to someone. Like when we go to a game and the national anthem is played, we all stand and we put our hand over our heart to honor our country, right? Regardless of what you think about our country, we stand and we show honor in this, and we assign value and weight to this. The opposite of honor is dishonor, or to treat something as common, to treat something with no weight as light, not weighty. So I wonder for you, like who have you treated as common in your life? Who are the people that you've taken weight away from? Who are the people that you may say, I really love this person, but you don't show them honor? You don't see value in them. What I mean is, perhaps the reason you don't have the promotion is because you don't honor your boss. A way that you can honor your boss is to talk great about them. A way that you can honor your boss is to find out what their favorite Starbucks drink is and bring it to them every week. No, really. Because who does that? Nobody does that. That's a way you can honor your boss. Perhaps you don't have the promotion because you don't honor your boss. Maybe the reason your kids are disrespectful is because you haven't assigned enough value to them. You haven't honored them like you should, because you give more time to playing a video game than you do to spending with them. A way you can honor your kids is by actually listening to what they say, by not making it so they have to call your name several times. Like, how can you honor your kids? Perhaps the reason your spouse isn't sleeping with you as much as you'd like is because you don't honor her. A way you can honor her is by never saying anything bad about her to or in front of her, around other people, or in front of your kids. You just say good things about her. Tell her she looks beautiful. Hold the door open for her. How can you honor the people in your life? See, Paul, he says, The living sacrifice life is one that's wrapped up in love. But even if you can't love everybody, you can honor everyone. And here's the thing about honor. When I honor somebody, it opens the door for love to come in. Like if you hate your boss, but you start buying him coffee every single, that'll change your mindset. And don't spit in it, but I mean, like buy him the coffee and then give it. It'll change your mindset, how you view him, right? And then that may start the relationship. That may start the conversation. And it opens the door for love to come in. The same with your spouse, the same with your kids, the same with your friends, the same with the person who abused you in your past. The same even with yourself. Some of you hate yourself because of what you've done. But it's time to honor yourself, to add value to yourself because God adds value to you. He says you're valuable and he loves you. And so Paul says this is what it's like to live as a living sacrifice, to love, to honor. And we do this in response to what God has done for us. That God first loved us by sending his son to die on a cross so that we could have a relationship with him. In a moment, we're going to celebrate what Jesus did for us on the cross by observing communion. There'll be the frontline team will come down with trays, and in those trays will be 2 cups and a stack. The bottom cup will have a piece of bread that represents Jesus' body that was broken for us on your behalf. The top cup has some juice that represents Jesus' blood that was shed so that you could be forgiven, so that we could have a relationship with God. As we take communion, my hope, my prayer for you is that it would do something in your life. You would be reminded of the sacrifice God made for you, and that you would feel something, perhaps a warm, fuzzy emotion, but also a conviction to this week put into practice what it means to be a living sacrifice by loving, by honoring. So would you guys pray with me? God, we thank you so much for the sacrifice you made for us, that we didn't deserve it, that in spite of our failures and flaws, you still loved us. You still died for us. God, I pray that that would impact us in such a way that this week, as we interact with people who have failures and flaws, people who have wronged us, people who we can't stand, God, let us love them like you loved us. Failures and flaws and all. God, this week, would you change how we live? Help us love with an agape love, a Philadelphia love, a Philostorgoi love, but if nothing else, help us to honor people, to give value to people, to see them as someone made in your image, someone you love. And because of that, it's in Jesus' name. Amen.